My name's Jonathan Wyner. I started life as a musician. Over the course of the last X number of decades, I've had an opportunity to work as a mastering engineer and an owner of a multi-room mastering facility. Started mastering records in 1985. Before that, I was mixing and producing and engineering records. I still do some of that as well. Director of Education for Isotope, which is a manufacturer of tools to help people in audio post and music production and other sort of related disciplines. We make noise reduction tools and restoration tools and tools to help people with capture and mixing and mastering as well. And I also am a professor of music production and engineering at Berklee College of Music.
Obviously, you have some experience mastering. Could you,
obviously,
could you name a couple, projects that you're proud of or people that you've worked with?
Yeah, I mean, I could rattle off a list of household names of people that I've worked on records for, and it ranges from across all genres, whether it's Aerosmith or James Taylor or Nirvana or the London Symphony Orchestra or Miles Davis or those aren't always when you ask about the projects that I'm most proud of. Okay, I will say that remastering all of the David Bowie records from RCA, that was kind of amazing. I don't know if I would say I'm most proud of that work because, and I'll say why in a moment, but it was some of the most exciting work, and I was able to dive deep over the course of several years working on those records. That was pretty awesome. I'm a huge fan. And I was a fan as a kid before I got to work on those records. Oh, wow. So that was like kind of a pinch me thing. It was like, hey, here's the master reel from Ziggy Stardust. Or I was doing some remixes of some of the multi-tracks, and being able to solo his vocal and listen to that was thrilling. But the things that I'm most proud of, sometimes it intersects with the high-profile artists, but sometimes it's where have I made the most difference. Or like working on, my grandfather was a composer, and I got to work on a record remastering and releasing some of his more obscure work, and just bringing that to the light of day. That was, that touched me personally in a different kind of way. And, when an artist says to me, wow, I'm hearing things in my music I was hoping I'd hear and I hadn't heard them until now. That, in some ways, those are the moments that I'm most proud of, because I feel like I've really helped and I've touched someone, or I've allowed someone to be touched by their own work in a really meaningful way. That's the thing that moves me and gets me really excited.
Is there anything in, there's a lot of people out there that they either try mastering themselves, or they think that it's not necessarily an important thing, or maybe they just can't afford it. Is there anything that you see that people are doing that you would give a suggestion, or that you would say, maybe you should focus on this area for something like playback normalization, or like things that people don't talk about too often?
Well, first of all, don't be distracted by the bright, shiny objects that are all the tools that we have. Because, the power that we have in DSP is incredible. But focus on the music. Do less. Don't try to be the hero, because the mastering engineer is not the one that wrote the song or recorded the song or wrote the vocals. The mastering engineer is like the final sort of editorial. But your work depends so much on everything that went before it, that if you find yourself trying to remix a track in mastering, you're probably getting yourself into trouble. And don't expect, it's not easy. I mean, it's like with anything, you have to practice it for a while to get good at it. You don't know how many times in my career I've had somebody say, man, I started recording for the first time 6 months ago, and my records still don't sound as good as the Beatles, or as Young Guru's records or whatever. And I'm like, 6 months, okay, and that's not even full time. Like, your expectations are not set correctly, it takes time. And if it was easy, I think it would be less interesting to people. It's like if you could suddenly tomorrow wake up and be as good a guitarist as Steve Vai, you'd probably get bored. I mean, it might be thrilling for a little while, but then where's the challenge to improve? So I would sort of say just approach it like any other creative discipline, and baby steps. Assume that you're not going to be great at it right from the outset. And just practice listening. Pay attention when you run across online or whatever, people who you respect saying, this is a great sounding record, or that's a great sounding record. Just sit down and listen to them. Like, engage in active listening and see if you can figure out what makes them great.
On that note, I heard Dave Pensado once say, and I believe someone else, he took this from someone else, he said something to the extent of, don't try to be who you admire, find out who they, inspire to be, and find out who those people are and try to be them. Who are people that you aspire to be, who influenced you?
I think we take a little bit from a lot of people. I mentioned Tom Bates. He was somebody who was incredibly skilled in, especially using compression. I learned a ton about that from him. But he was somebody who was incredibly humble, never assumed that he was right, always checked in with people. These are like some of the lessons I got from Tom. But if I tried to make a record sound like Tom would make it, I would fail. That's not me. I think we take little lessons from lots of different people. Brian Eno was a hero of mine because the way I don't even know how I can. He was like a sound painter. Is like a sound painter. His command of sort of abstracted sound objects and tones just fascinated me endlessly when I was younger, and I've followed his career to date. And I think I've sort of learned a little bit from just through my admiration of his work. Miles Davis, somebody who was able to get so much while being so invested in the notion of economy, not overplaying, and yet, could say so much with a single note. I don't know. I'm just throwing out some ideas. I haven't really thought about it that hard, but I think when you see somebody who's really great at something that you find moving, just, try to figure out what motivates them and see what you can learn from that, and see if there's something about what they do that you can bring into your own practice.
That's a great spot to wrap it up. One personal question: do you ever find it a burden to be in the audio industry and have listening ears? Like you hear something, you're like, you can't just listen to music. I know you always say, try to be a good listener, and that's kind of the first step to mastering, is just listening. Is there ever a time where you're like, oh well, something's a little out of phase there? Or...
No, it doesn't bother me at all. I actually love it. I love that I have the insight. It's like, when you go to an art gallery, if you're an expert painter, are you going to just totally critique the technique of a Renoir and not be able to appreciate it? No, right? I mean, it's the same thing. You might have insights into how something got to be the way it is. That doesn't mean you can't appreciate it. I love the Velvet Underground, that band. Messy band, out of tune, not necessarily the greatest sounding recordings, but I love the music. And I've never lost that. Everybody goes through a period where, the first 3 years, if you're lucky enough to be able to spend a ton of time doing this work, where you start to feel like, I don't even know what I'm hearing anymore. And for a little while, music starts to sound like noise, I think. I think everybody gets to that point at some point, but you push through it and you come out the other side. And you have to take care of yourself, make sure you don't listen too long, make sure you don't listen too loud for too long. But for me, I love having the refined vocabulary, you know, to tell you something about an acoustic space when I walk into it and why it sounds the way it does, or, you know, like I think I understand, I hear the compression on that instrument in a mix, or I think I know what microphone that was, or because it all contributes to the color of the thing that I'm listening to. But I think your question is great because at the end of the day, I think it makes us want to focus on the music, right? I mean, if music, audio engineering is what people are doing, that's the whole reason for doing it in the first place. It's the creativity and the, you know, the voice of the artist, the vision of the artist that we want to love. And everything else is just, you know, secondary, I guess.